Right. So again, I mean, I think this even the terminology is almost deceiving because this idea of good insinuates virtue, and at the same time, it could also, in the quantitative science, insinuate some sort of measure being hit at quite precisely to some rounding value, right? So I think there's a lot of space for AI to trip up in that, and I think even when you sort of alluded to this idea of the page rank algorithm, which is basically what initially Google does, it doesn't do that anymore. And sort of how quickly, I think initially whoever was on the internet early on realized how, well, not necessarily realized, but saw how useful it was. It really did kind of give you what you asked for. And you had to ask it certain ways maybe, but you're getting the information you want. Now it's something else. Might be more marketing. I think the gift system has been gamed, which to some degree is could be good, could be bad. Obviously, it gives a lot of people opportunity to be able to have their products out there, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's not exactly what people always want from this technology. So this also sort of brings me to, when we talk about gaming algorithms, sort of how people feel about AI. So there's a lot of trepidation, to say the least, about what it can do, what it can't do, what it will do, what it won't do, what it should or shouldn't do as well. So could you talk a little bit about, because you're, if there's one person who understands the limits of this technology, it's you, because you work at the very physical, at the electron shunting level of it. So could you talk about its limits and sort of what you see it can and can't do? Maybe it's a bit professorial, this request, but it'd be interesting to get any of your points of view on it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more scared of the people using AI and the people developing AI than AI itself, right? Because I feel like human beings are so capable of, we're capable of distorting, right? So if we are the responsible owners of technology, and we should be the responsible owners of technology, then it is our responsibility to make sure that it is not misused, and there are the right regulations and the right policies and all of these things that are put in place, because it's very easy to misuse technology, right? For example, we can abdicate our own responsibility. We, oh my, there's an AI system over there, right? The AI system said so. So let's all follow the rules and let's just force the rules, right? But what if the rule doesn't make any sense? What if AI made a mistake? What if AI predicted something wrong? Who is going to arbitrate, right? And do we need authoritative person to arbitrate, or can regular person arbitrate? So I worry that the rights of the regular people who don't have power are more going to be at risk, right? Because they are not going to be able to voice themselves authoritatively against policies and systems and processes, while these things have to be put in place. And we have to pay attention to who is putting these things in place and how they're put in place and what is the exception. I think in AI, we would need a lot of exception handling. Just like when we started programming in C and C++, we had a great deal of exception handling, right? And I think we need that before we can say that these systems are really good, because the data we're dealing with is inherently terribly biased. And then people are operating with constraints, and people are operating with the knowledge that they are taught and built upon. So it's very difficult for somebody to break up. We're a system of rules, right? We want to follow rules. These are good things. But if you have the wrong rules in place, and that's why the world is freaking out, right? That's why people are, because there's a genuine concern that AI can be really utilized for not good. But the technology in itself is somewhat neutral. It is the implementers of these technology and the usage patterns of the technology and power behind the technology that really would make it really bad. So I think if we start small and we say, let's use AI for efficiency reasons and sort of build upon, right? Let's just get efficiencies out of AI rather than having large systems mandate and have a very, very important place in our lives. I think it's important to start small, and it's important to start looking at the value that we get and the efficiencies that we get from these technologies.
But what do you mean by efficiencies? Is it the efficiency with which the technology is able to work, or the efficiency with which it's able to produce results that are, I want to say, virtuous, right? Because once you make decisions, there is a concept of morality that's sort of added there at this level of like pseudo consciousness, right? Because I mean, you can say an if else statement can have morality, but not intrinsically. But I think the way that AI is that it is interacting with a person and making a decision for them. It's kind of how it's being used. Um, so so how so how do you make that happen? I suppose I'm not sure if that's a very well structured question, but it's a very tough thing, right? Because the English language itself it's just by its very nature like abstract. Can you embed that level of abstraction into a chip?
Yeah. It's a very, very difficult question, and it's a very difficult problem. I would sort of move towards enterprises, right? Like, let's start with the efficiencies before we try to make all consumers efficient. Then we go down that path. Let's make enterprises efficient, right? These businesses that are spending so much money in operational cost. And I think today we are still spending as enterprises. When I talk to customers, all of my customers are spending huge amounts of money in operational cost. Sometimes it's tickets. They receive like 400,000 tickets in an IT department. There's no knowledge base for the employees to go seek and search and get answers. There's no clusters and classifications for their customers. They don't even know which customers are really good, which customers are not so good, and so on and so forth. So I think the efficiency layer is just that's why I think that now the world is basically saying, hey, are you an AI company doing business, or are you a company doing business and then just using AI as a tooling? And I think every company will eventually become an AI company. And that means it will have to embrace AI for its foundational back office operational reasons, right? And operational reasons, it's just like you need maps. I remember working for a mapping company before, and I was telling people, hey, why do you have static maps on your website? You should have dynamic maps on your website, because people usually get a picture of their location and they just showed you a static map. And now we have a dynamic map. So you can not just click on the picture, you can actually navigate directions and all of those things. In a way, AI is going to go in that level, right? Like, so you're not just going to have inefficiencies in your organization. You need to up level your organization to get efficiencies just from an operational standpoint. Then you go to the next level and you start to provide value to your customers through AI and tools, building out new products. I've been at the other end of the spectrum, so I've actually created revenue through AI, right? So you can have net new revenue streams and you can have net new businesses being created out of being an AI company. But starting off, I think the efficiencies can just be at the enterprise level, really just making sure that your operations are running, your vendor purchases are tracked, your performance reviews are done via some sort of a prediction model. And, you keep track of all of the data and you use the data correctly. I even remember, even with HCM systems like HR systems are so manual today. I mean, if you have two people with the same name, you can't differentiate, right? You need a country manager to say, okay, what's their record and what's this record, and then what kind of name version you need to do in order to pull out their records differently. The older systems are kind of struggling with that still. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, with AI and efficiencies and cost in business. And I think that's where we have to start. And then the consumer end will continue to grow faster and quicker, like ChatGPTs and others, where people will use some sort of a ChatGPT type model for searching. They would want to know, not just query search and putting it all together. But I was recently sitting with one company that said, let's take ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT how we should compete better. And ChatGPT did a very good job telling them what their weaknesses were in that industry and how they compete better and what their competition is doing. And, for a baseline, I was super impressed, right? And I was sitting with the CEO and all of the group of people, and they said, we didn't know this. There was so much information here that we didn't know. So I think as humans, we are getting to the limits of the amount of information we can pull via search. There's so much information out there, as you know, and as all of us are experiencing. We are under information overload. So in information overload, how do you even pull base information that is relevant to you, that is contextual, that actually provides value, right? We start there. And then we have to put in a lot of regulations in place as we go higher and higher and say, let's go with AI further. Like, this recent case about the lawyers having ChatGPT do the thing, that's just over the top, right? Like we should not be going there. That is on the other side. Right? I think we have a lot of crawling to do and we have a lot of efficiencies to get. But that said, I think on the enterprise side, on the government side, we are seeing a lot of adoption, and that's primarily because people are saying, hey, given that we have. I mean, we saw how text has changed our lives, right? Now anymore, you don't write a very long email if you just want to put in two sentences,
Emails have
right?
become texts, actually. If you write an email the way you used to, you can be considered a Luddite or someone who wants to waste someone else's time.
That's right. And so just imagine the next level where you have assistant-based technology, right? It's not even text. It's just like you're saying, hey, I'm thinking of David and I want to give him this text. And then it automatically says, David, Janet's trying to text you and get hold of you or your time. And that's the thing, right? Like one less typing, one less, whatever, right? Like one less bit of your time because it's all measured in time. So I think those are where the technologies will go, where you will get assistance, pull out my favorite, whatever, look at my email that I wrote from like 2 months ago, pull that out. So search will really go to the next level, in my opinion, right? And this is why I think Microsoft with Copilot has really made a big statement, right? And so we can see like even programming, when you see like these newer technologies of AI, I mean, they're getting through computer science course very well, right? And you say, wow, did it study the whole coursework in such a short period of time and it got a 4.0 GPA score or 3.9 GPA score? That's like very good, right? And so, yeah, it's very, very good. So these technologies, and that's what we are seeing. We are seeing the power of these technologies, and the power of the technologies frightening us. Instead, I think we should really look at the power of the technology and say, we have such a powerful technology, how can we try to be more efficient? What is open to being less manual? So I think automation, we'll see automation really, cognitive automation really take off in the next years as companies realize the amazing potential. Kids have really figured that out. They're like, I'm not writing a paper from scratch. I'm already going to get a lot of data using ChatGPT about this particular topic, whatever, right? Whether it's gun control or whatever control it is that they want to learn about the topic, submit a paper, or they have something really passionate about, they're going to use some sort of, and calendaring. Like these are things like I've noticed like how well ChatGPT can do planning and calendaring and managing of tasks and letting you know like this task is here and there. So, those are all early things that you'd be like, wow, my life is never going to be the same with Alexa,
Hi.
right? Alexa came about, and then you could do so much things, even just pulling out your music that you like and asking Alexa a lot of things that you would normally have to go do.
It makes traffic much less of a chore than it used to for a lot of people.
That's right. It's amazing. Yeah, you're not wasting time, and that's what happens when you have information overload. Everybody's pulling for your time, and you are pulling for your own time. So then these efficiencies matter because it gives you relief.
So I think, and just to summarize what you said, I think the best example is when you talked about how companies, the searching in a company for someone's name is a complex issue. Something as simple as that. If you have the same name, who are you really? And then this, getting that identity of a person, of a company of 4,000 or 5,000 people, there's quite a few John Smiths, and having someone make that decision for you, or having an AI really get that information for you can save you a lot of time, because it's too simple a question for you to have to call 5 or 6 people in an organization. So I think that's a very powerful idea.
Yeah. Also think like in the database world, we had this whole problem of deduplication, right? Like it's showing up over and over again. And you're like, is it the same Jay Lee that I'm talking to? Is it a different Jay Lee? Is it a middle name? There's H in the middle. What's going on, right? And now and context, like which department are they? What are they working on? Is it the same person I've interacted with? Is it a different person?
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, even so it's interesting. The Israeli security sort of force had a company that came out of it, and essentially their way of identifying people is how many dimensions of information exist, and that sort of defines sort of authenticity. So a person who isn't a person who doesn't have a nefarious intention has quite a few breadcrumbs of their identity existing all over the place, and a person that does have a nefarious intention has maybe 1 or 2 threads. And if you look at it as a database table, it's just how many columns does this ID have, and it's sort of the same. If you have too many columns, you might need someone to go look at that. That's sort of what's popping up in my head when you talk about identifying individuals. So I have someone just scrape one, run all the columns in a row and find out sort of who it is, or or how many dimensions of a person can an AI identify, and then that tells you who they are, and then you can really ask that question. And when we talk about AI in this way, and we talk about it helping us make these kind of decisions, all these sort of this is a very simple example. It's great. But as you sort of scale up that decision matrix, there's two things, and I think this sort of exemplifies a lot of people's concerns. And it'd be interesting to hear your point of view on it. Is as we offload these decisions and we codify them. So you initially gave the example of you have this hardware that you have to kind of have a lot of experts decide what you encode as the actual decision that's going to be made. As we stack these decisions, first of all, if we get one wrong, what happens? And the second thing is how a company is reacting to an environment. When the environment changes, the company becomes obsolete. How does a company deal with that reality? Especially with something like hardware. I mean, this also depends on the company, but hardware is quite concrete in its outcomes and exists in places for quite long periods of time. And software, you can kind of change it, right? That's almost software in software engineering space. Software is defined by kind of its velocity of change. So can you talk to a little bit about that and how organizations now have to see themselves now and see? I'm sure there's going to be an emergent organizational behavior in terms of how they see how things happen. I'm not sure if I'm trying to construct this question as well as I can, but it is like a whole new, if AI is the center, it's really about managing the AI in a way that it reacts to the market and the sort of knowing how many decision layers deep is it that you have to go extract something if you want to change it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you said it, like Chris, the AI is a massive disruptor, right? It's going to change a lot of things, and especially when it crosses the tipping point. So now the silicon chips that you develop for AI have to look very different from the silicon chips that you develop for CPU and for x86, right? It cannot be the same chip just because the artifacts that is required for compilation versus the artifacts that are required for training are completely different, right? So how you compiled a set of code or how you compiled programs are very different from training, where there's no compilation required, but it's a learning system, right? And so the chip that does programming is not the same chip that could do well with training and learning, right? And so you're looking at fundamental changes. That on top of the fact that you have very strong abstraction layers that you have to work through, right? Because the silicon is at the very bottom. And then you have all these different layers that you have to orchestrate and work through. So abstraction is going to be another factor. Then it is the whole cloud. Like when you think about cloud, like it's similar to the internet, right? You're using the cloud, but yet you don't know that you are so far away from your physical machine. You're really in a data center in a cloud that you are using all of the ecosystems that come with that cloud. So, that level of abstraction where everything is pooled, memory is pooled, storage is pooled, compute is pooled, and you're working with fleets, and these fleets load balancers can move the fleet off to any sort of configuration that they would choose. They can even, predict which workload should work on which hardware and so on and so forth. All of these things become very big challenges for hardware, becomes very big challenges for silicon, right? Because as you think about it, the control is lost, where we had very tight coupling between what was run on the silicon from the whole software stack, x86. If you look at it was so tightly coupled, you almost knew what outcome you were getting and what you needed to build. Now, so loosely coupled, and it is so mix and match, and it's such an abstraction layer. So you're going to rely very heavily on the APIs that you have, or you're going to rely very heavily on the standards that you put in place, and so on and so forth. So with AI, now most of the CSPs and Intel, we're all building AI chips, right? They're going to go look different from your regular chips, just because the game is different. You're looking at different types of clusters, and you often talk about the parameter space, right? Somewhere I published these parameter spaces, and we've gone from like millions of parameters to billions of parameters, and now we're dealing with like trillions of parameters, right? Well, where are we going to end up with this parameter space? Just the space and scale of parameters, right? How are we going to tackle that? Can our traditional silicon, can our traditional chips help us with this parameter space, right? And eventually, we would have to keep up with the knowledge of the world. We can't come back and keep on cutting down the knowledge of the world and cleaning it into small little snippets, right? So I see that the conversation changes when AI can deal with the noise and the signal on its own. So if AI can sit at the edge of data and start to assign, and it's doing that very well. This is how autonomous cars are working, because it can do that discernment of world data very well, right? Because world data is authoritative, there's encyclopedias on it, and it can learn. But when we get in language, because language has all of these tokens that is already around for many. I mean, of course, the connotations we still have to understand, and accents and cultures, and the inner meaning of language, and different languages add more complexity to that.
And piping in the information about how the language changes and what meanings are, jargon, slang, those different kinds of world data, perfect physical world data, the data that we care about usually seemingly is this, seventh tier app layer on top, which is human generated information. But please go ahead.
Think also about natural language intelligence, right? Like there's so much intelligence built into the way we speak, and the tone and the context of it, and even expressions that come through in these languages. So we're nowhere close on that, but we are getting there. But
funny enough, the internet that made it change faster, because they cascades throughout the world even faster than it used to. So these iteration cycles or these change cycles are happening more frequently. A person 2 years younger than you can speak in a way completely different, because there's something that proliferated that you don't recognize. But yeah.
So now you turn it around to the enterprises, and enterprises are the oldest change. They are, they have so much history and so much traditions. It's difficult for them to pivot and change, but they have to. We have to keep up with the change that is occurring in the consumption world, right? And so as enterprises look to follow the consumption world, and as they look to cater and help the consumption world, you remember the time when we never allowed texting and social media in enterprises. And now social media and texting is part of an enterprise, right? Because the enterprise has figured out that is part of the world. We cannot keep it out. We have to bring it in. And similarly, we will see that in the intelligence models, the knowledge models will have to get better. And this is where I think the conversation in language will change, when we can take all of the enterprise data and not have to spend so much time on data quality and noise and encoders and decoders, and really trying to build out these discriminators and focus more on trying to figure out, hey, how do I look at cross data sets, like data sets that have completely different formats and schemas, and can these schemas and formats evolve over time? What is the bias in the data set, and how do we even tag these biases, right? Like how do we put an give us an understanding of this bias, and where do we build the semantics, the way we represent these data sets? Like how are the semantics going to be built? What features do we extract or don't extract? Like today we are all extracting a lot of features, but can we live without extracting the features and just focus on the signals? And is that enough focus to just, like the human brain, just focus on what matters and focus on the signals and build from there? But I think this whole generative AI has so much promise. And the promise is because it can create new data sets. And so if AI can create data sets, powerful data sets, that is, again, human augmented or human helped by human, then I think we are on to something very big, right? Now we look at factories, we look at these enormous production sites, we look at trying to look at operational things like GE equipment and manufacturing and whatnot, different industries, even life sciences industries, where you're discovering cancer or drug or looking at structural biology. These are areas where now generative AI can take the knowledge of a human, replicate the knowledge. And that was the power I saw with generative AI in the factories, where generative AI quickly took what belonged to a few elite set of domain experts, device physicists, scientists that studied this day in and day out. It took that knowledge or that base data set and replicated massive amounts of failure data or massive amounts of disk capacitor data that was then used to train, right? So now you're creating the data that you need to train. So you're creating the right data to train it on, and then you're using the same data to then do the predictions, right? So that sort of shift, when that happens with generative AI, we are on the precipice of something very huge, something massive, right? Because now we can go into our factories and we can look at all of the archaic ways of doing things and really add what I call super productivity to enterprise.
So one thing I'd love to ask is, as technical as we've been and as granular as you have been, you are at a different tier of your organization as the CPP. So you have to take all this and then also sort of be a leader and translate this in more languages than most people are probably used to, and not necessarily non-English languages, but ways of understanding. And then you also lead a team, obviously, and probably multiple teams. So it'd be great to get your understanding on leadership, especially in technology, and sort of how you've seen that it not only evolve, but what it's going to be now and what it's going to need to be. And it'd be interesting to see, because you've probably, especially in the AI space, so what is it, how you presenting ideas to people and framing things so that they can, they are sort of in an environment that's preparing them for this kind of future.
I distinguish a lot between managers and leaders, right? And I think that a lot of us, we were managers first. We managed large teams, we managed large organizations, and we came into operational roles and other leadership roles through management track. And so if you look at the management track and how you became a leader through management track, you were never really trained to be a leader. But to me, leaders are people who have vision. Leaders are people who inspire. Leaders are people who have deep subject matter expert and knowledge, because they can gain the respect of their team and be transparent as they lead organizations. And I think that when you are a leader, your craft, what you're really good at, becomes very important, because people read that, people see that, right? And they look to you to set the direction, to get the customers to be proficient in your area of expertise or whatever, and to have credibility when you talk to your customers, because leadership is a public stage. And I always say that, you can't fake it when you are a leader. You just really have to be out there, and the people are going to either respect you as a leader or not respect you as a leader. And the people will always respect you as a leader when they see that you are able to lead, not just manage. Management is about just keeping together the operational aspects and dealing with your roadmaps and making sure that your deliveries are happening. We do need the managerial aspect, but I think leadership is directing and taking and going into new territories and opening new grounds and leading people through their fear of adoption of new technologies and new markets and new businesses that operate. So I do think that, I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that despite my leadership and despite where I am leading these organizations and folks, I have spent enough amount of time making sure that I'm relevant in my industry, and relevant because I was a practitioner, always is a practitioner, will remain a practitioner. I get, and it's about participation. It's about how you participate with your teams, right? I am not afraid to discuss hard problems. I'm not afraid to discuss, get into the code if that's what it takes. I'm not afraid to have deeper conversations around things and just really look at trade-offs and pros and cons. It's not a narrative that we're trying to fit into. It's more leading the team. And I think that is the future leaders would have to hone in on that, right? You can't be a manager and lead a company. You'd have to really step into leadership in a different way than you have in the past. In the past, you could be a manager because you're very well liked, or because you're very much renowned within the organization, or you spend a lot of time in the organization. Many reasons why you are stepped from a manager role to a leader role, right? But I think true leaders will eventually be leading the organizations, and people would want to work for them, because a title does not make a leader. titles do not make a leader. I think that if you have to really be a leader, it is beyond title, your ability to influence the people. And you've secured the hearts of the people working for you. And the hearts of the people, when you secure the hearts of the people working for you, they work for you at all hours of the day because they're so passionate about your mission. They're so passionate about what you do. And it goes the same with me, right? I work all hours of the day because I'm passionate about what I do. So it translates all through your leadership and it translates all through to the team members. So that's what I believe in. I totally believe in the fact that title does not a leader make, but at the end of the day, the people determine whether you are a good leader or not.
Well, thank you for being a leader on this public stage. And if someone wanted to find you, where would they be able to do so?
Well, they can look me up in LinkedIn. I have my email right at the top, george.janet@gmail.com, and also Intel. So you can email me at Intel as well. And I would love to be of value.
Thank you very much. It was very informative, and I do appreciate the time. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It was a great time. Thank you. If you like what you saw, take a look at the description. You'll see segments. You'll see the full podcast. Go take a look. Please go listen. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. We'll see you later.